I brought 2 video cameras with me. When I left Australia, I thought I have to take revenge and make Rick Archer, who is interviewing so many people, the victim of the situation. So here's Rick, and we have not spoken with each other at all, except we said hello and goodbye, perhaps. Yeah. So we don't know. I know more about you than you know about me, because I have seen innumerable videos. We share a lot of a similar past. Oh. Yes, in that I was initiated in 1970 into TM. Oh. And in 1973 I became a TM teacher. Oh, later I also pulled out. I was a very consistent meditator for 7 years only. Mm-hmm. And for me the whole thing became too dogmatic, so yeah. I couldn't do it. And similar to you, I had organized a few events, more eclectic events. Somebody was talking about Socrates, another one was talking about Aurobindo. Mm-hmm. And the TM movement got to know about it, and so they said, you can't do this. And right. I said, sorry, I go.
That's the kind of way I was.
So, and I left before the city stuff came up, you know, the flying thing. How about you?
No, actually, I learned the cities and I practiced them for 25 years.
Really?
Yeah, mainly out of a sense of obedience. You know, I thought, all right, my teacher told me to do this, I'm going to do this, but I never really enjoyed it that much. Some people do. Some people love the city practice. I just always preferred plain vanilla meditation. I like to just settle in and go deep. And which is not to say that I might not try them again someday, but it just didn't sort of, wasn't as meaningful for me as for some people. Mm. So I stopped doing that about 13, 14 years ago.
Yes, but I hear that you're still keeping it as a beautiful relaxation for mornings and evenings.
I still meditate like 3 hours a day or so.
3 hours?
Yeah. At various times.
That's why you come across so fresh on your interviews. Yeah. Yeah, because it's a fair bit of interviewing. And I have always been impressed by the fact how well you were prepared. You know, you read the books, you went through so many videos of these different people.
I don't usually sit and watch the videos, but what I do is I have some software that'll take a YouTube video or even a whole series of YouTube videos, download them, extract the audio, and then all I have to do is import that audio into iTunes and click a button and it goes into my iPod, and then I can go out and cut the grass and listen, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
So you know, my wife always jokes about it because she'll say something to me and I'll say, huh? And I'll have to turn off my iPod so I can hear what she says. But I pretty much try to use my time that way, and I go through hours a week of listening to people.
You have to probably sometimes practice a little bit of self-discipline, because throughout your videos one gets sort of a little bit of a tendency that emerges sporadically, where you would tend to reject the idea that there's enlightenment and that's it, or there's self-realization, that's it.
Oh, I do reject that idea.
Yeah.
First of all, I can't think of any examples of anybody I've met for whom I would feel, for whom I have, or whom I have felt that they were finished or done or couldn't, you know, become wiser or clearer or deeper in their experience and their understanding. And, you know, some popular teachers like Adyashanti do discuss this particular point and say that there is a syndrome or a tendency in which people can be so enamored of this whatever state they have attained that it seems impossible to believe there could be more, and you can get kind of stuck in a certain level of realization thinking that that's all there is to it. But in my personal opinion, there is no end to it. You know, you may have heard me say in some lecture or some interview I gave that Maharishi once gave this lecture about what he called the 16 kalas. And kalas were thought, he explained, were like levels of evolution. And he said that the human beings comprise maybe the 4th through the 8th kala. And that so above the human level, there are 8 more levels of evolution that one could attain. And you know, so if that's true, then you know, Ramana Maharshi was only halfway there in terms of what could theoretically be attained by a soul.
Yeah. And people like sorry for quoting Tony Parsons again.
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah.
I like Tony Parsons. I don't. If you're watching.
He would say.
I think there's more to go, but you're a good guy.
He would say, that's it.
Right.
You recognize that you are not there.
Right.
That the whole idea that you're there as an individual is an illusion.
Right.
And then once you drop your physical body, that's it.
Right.
There's no more instrument to act through.
Yeah. So, for instance, he doesn't believe in reincarnation because he says there's nothing to reincarnate. There is no entity in there which can reincarnate from one life to another. But, I mean, there are popular TV shows which are utterly convincing about young kids who remember their previous life and, go wake up and screaming, afraid of fire or something, and then have this vivid memories of having been burned in a house, and then the parents take the kid to the town where it supposedly took place, and they see all the evidence for exactly what the kid described. I mean, there are whole books and things about this. So apparently, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people don't believe it, but apparently reincarnation is a thing. And therefore there is some jiva, or some entity, which evolves from life to life. And as the Gita says, it's like changing clothes. When it's time to move into a new body, it's like changing clothes.
According to this, the jiva is not identical with the illusory identification with a limited me. Is that correct? Because if that was identical, then logically, once you discard it, because you have seen through the fact that it is really not there.
Yeah.
With that would also drop the illusion that anything is there that would reincarnate. But if the jiva is something else, maybe it is not the illusory me, but still some sort of very timeless entity that somehow gives you a foundation for attaching individuality and personality to. Maybe that's what you mean by jiva.
Yeah, and a lot of this is kind of speculative and philosophical. We're just talking about philosophical theories that we happen to resonate with or not, and ultimately, who knows? I don't, but I'm just kind of stating a little bit logically in terms of what makes sense to me.
Yes.
And there does seem to be some evidence here and there.
Yes.
And of course, some people say that some people. I mean, one of the classic ideas is of those who acknowledge reincarnation is you get off the wheel eventually. When you get enlightened, you're no longer reincarnated, and that may be. But who knows? It might. It's like, we should probably state the practical stuff that we actually know.
Yeah, but then practically, when you sense the effects of your meditation, you sense the fact of a presence that's timeless.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to say that something that's timeless or it's ever present will have any relevance in terms of reincarnation, because that's just the presence that doesn't come and go.
The presence doesn't come and go, but your ability to express the presence, to reflect the presence, to live the presence, to transmit the presence, that can modulate, can be brighter or dimmer, and so on. And so I think, and Adyashanti was saying last night, the awakening is kind of like the first step. After that, then it's all about embodiment and being able to express and live this awakening that you've had to greater and greater degrees of fullness. And he mentioned that that's something he felt goes on throughout your entire life. And
that was quite interesting. I thought it was interesting also yesterday afternoon. What puzzled me in the beginning was that he implied a bit of effort. He said you have to be fairly tenacious, or a word like this he used, to then further develop and make your being, go through the whole system and enrich it and whatever it does.
Yeah.
But then towards the end of the discussion, he sort of said more that in each step there's a sense of completion. So there's no sense of lack. And therefore there's no greed in terms of I need to reach more. So whatever happens then is a natural flowing of events that doesn't come out of the ambition to reach more or to become a better person. But in the beginning, actually it sounded like this. When he introduced the idea, I thought I may as well be in church where they tell me to be a good person and that enlightenment isn't good enough, you see.
Well, in my own experience, I went through a long period of many years where I really felt kind of a desperate craving for enlightenment. It's like, because my present experience wasn't good enough, and I really kind of was, yearning for the glorious thing that I'd heard described so many times. I wanted to be there. At a certain point, and it wasn't necessarily a certain day where I could mark on a calendar, but at a certain point that kind of shifted into a sense of very great contentment with where I am now, but also a realization that it's going to just continue to get better. So the seeking energy kind of transformed itself into more of an adventure, an exploration kind of thing. It's so interesting to see how this is going to continue to unfold. It's not like I'm not going to be happy till I get there. It's like things are good now.
Yes, of course, and there's nothing wrong, obviously, with being on the journey. I'm sure that's the least that we can get from the messages that come across, that resistance towards what is useless.
Yeah.
So we may as well accept it the way it is.
Isn't there some kind of parody of some kind of Gestapo guy saying, "Resistance is futile"?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
So is TM at the moment, I mean, I couldn't say, the question is probably answered, because if you do it 3 hours a day, you wouldn't have anything else, except mowing the lawn.
That. Well, actually, strictly speaking, I don't do TM because I got a different mantra from a different teacher. So I'm doing, from Amma, the hugging saint, that people call her. And so I'm using a different mantra, but I use it TM style, which is how I know to meditate.
Yes.
So
Yes,
that's my particular practice.
And I think it's very...
And I do yoga, things like that.
Yeah, that's why you're so slim and I'm not. I used to. Yeah. But, I think the system of TM is really very smart.
It's very intelligent.
Yeah, because you're looking at the instrument that's normally thinking as if it was just a sound. And therefore the intellect that's usually caught in intellectual thinking is engaged to produce the sound that you look at. If you look at any sense perception without adding a label to it, that's called pure perception. And because there's no concept involved,
You can transcend the conceptual level.
Yes, and there must be the sense of freedom from being caught by concepts.
Yeah.
And that is the beautiful thing about using a mantra where you don't know the meaning of.
Another nice thing about it, which is worth mentioning in case people are interested, is that the technique, and here we are promoting TM, the technique works on the principle of the natural tendency of the mind to seek a field of greater happiness. And if you think about it, our attention is always moving about, but it does have it sort of has a motivation for moving, which is to seek greater happiness. And if we're, you can imagine yourself sitting in school when you were a kid, listening to some boring thing. You looked out the window because you were looking for some greater fulfillment than you were finding in the classroom. We can think of a million other examples. So all the traditional teachings say that this pure consciousness, being, presence, whatever, is supposed to be a very blissful state. Satchidananda. Ananda means bliss. And so if it's a source of great bliss and happiness, then it would seem that the mind would want to go toward it if it had the opportunity.
Yes.
But our senses are so constituted as to direct our attention outwards, and that has become the established habit, and we've forgotten how to turn them inward to experience that inner bliss. So this type of meditation we're describing, TM, is just a way of allowing the attention to turn 180 degrees and utilize that natural tendency of the mind to seek a field of greater happiness and get down to transcendent. And it doesn't involve effort because the mind will move effortlessly if it's given the opportunity to go in a more gratifying direction.
Yeah, I would probably see it slightly differently. And I would probably argue that the mind as such has a natural tendency to ignore the place that it hasn't got access to, which is the non-conceptual. But the attention that is looking at the thoughts and is usually entangled with the contents of concepts and thoughts, is glad that there's maybe something like TM, where finally it can follow its desire or its attraction towards that which is much more fulfilling than the conceptual world, which is a non-conceptual world. And therefore, it uses the mind that has previously distracted it from, by using the mantra, stay looking at the mind using the mantra, but then the mantra, the sound, which is non-conceptual, will then enable the attention to naturally flow back into its own home, so to speak.
First form, second form?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful trick, and this mantric.
Do you still meditate? In some way, shape, or form?
I have my attention there. You know, that's if you want to call it meditation. Yeah, some people call it non-meditation.
That's okay. Everybody's walking back and forth. I'm not doing an interview. He's interviewing me.
Yes, yes. Now, having seen all your interviews, which were so incredibly delightful.
Have you actually seen all of them?
No.
Oh.
Some I have probably
deserve a T-shirt or something. You've seen all of them.
I started probably most of them.
Yeah.
And then after, let's say 10 minutes or so, I know whether I'm interested to go further
That's
or not.
what I would recommend.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
you don't have to sit and watch 250 two-hour interviews.
Yes.
Try 10 minutes and see if it grabs it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I was ever so grateful to have that easy access to a variety of people who have something to say. Mm-hmm. It is probably the most versatile and comprehensive source for anybody who wants to figure out who may be the best person to listen to on their own path. I think that's just unbelievable. And I think your function and the role that you play as this host is much bigger and much more important than you probably imagine, because many people will feel the trigger to take it further after they've seen one of your videos, and this is really marvelous. Now, from your point, you have seen so many videos, one could ask this maybe slightly stereotype question: are you not getting tired of it?
Oh, no, I totally love it. I mean, if I had to just sit and watch all these videos, if I had to sit and watch all my own interviews, I don't know, maybe I would get tired of it. But being the interviewer is a whole nother thing. And it's kind of, for me, it's kind of what it's my dharma, you know, it's what my whole life is actually kind of led up to this in a way, in terms of what I've been doing with my life, meditating and teaching and whatnot. It's kind of given me qualifications for doing this. And so it's something that people tell me I'm good at, and I enjoy doing it. And there's, you know, and there's such a variety of interesting people out there to talk to. It's not, if they were all saying exactly the same thing, that would get boring. But there's as much variety of these people as there is in a beautiful flower garden with all kinds of flowers, and each one has something to offer. So you know, I hope to do this for the rest of my life.
That's wonderful.
And do it even more than I'm doing it.
And even much earlier on, you said there are more people who want to be interviewed than what you can actually fit into your time frame.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got a waiting list of about 1,200 people.
No.
Yeah, and
that's amazing. What, 1,200 people?
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
Which I'll be in my 90s if I do one a week at that rate.
Yeah, but by that time, more people would have accumulated.
They still do, and in fact.
So who is doing the selection?
My wife, to a great extent. She took it over. It used to be me doing everything, but now she's taken over the.
How do you do it? Do you just throw a dice or something?
No, it's kind of a mixture of things. People send in suggestions, and we keep a track and how many votes people are getting, so to speak. And so that's one criterion. Other times,
where do you get the votes from?
People who send in suggestions. Like if you were to email me and say interview so and so, that would be a vote. You know, although we had a form on the website for submitting these suggestions, but it was taking my wife a couple of hours a day sometimes just to process all these suggestions that were coming in and check the people out and add the vote. And also, for the time being, we've shut that forum down and we're not really taking new suggestions.
It's really nice that your wife is pulling on the same string, isn't it?
Yeah. Ironically, she's actually never watched one of my interviews. She hears my side of it, but I have earphones in, so she can't hear the other side. She watches bits and pieces, but she's really not into sitting in front of the computer watching interviews. And she she herself is a spiritual person, has been on a spiritual path for a long time, but it doesn't interest her that much. But she knows I love it, and she knows that I need help.
But you must have enough interest to do the pre-selection process, which must be, you have to have a certain sense of appropriateness.
She does. Hers is much better than mine sometimes. She has a good sense of judgment and, everything from what clothes I put on to, who I interview. She sometimes is able to really nail it,
Oh, that's interesting.
She's a good judge of people, I think. I have input too, obviously, and we talk about who we're going to invite next and kind of decide and all.
Yeah, because once you have decided on somebody, then this amazing thing happens that you dedicate so much time to preparing yourself.
I do. And then, there have been one or two cases where, I can think of a couple of examples where I've started preparing for somebody, having agreed to do an interview, and as I start listening, I think, oh my God, what am I going to do with this guy? This is a mistake. He doesn't really, he's not there. And so then I'll just kind of make the best of it, And there are other cases where I put a lot of attention and time into it, and the person themselves doesn't seem that interested after all. I think, what the heck did they agree to do this for, or even want to do this for? If they don't really have anything to say, or they're not that interesting. So there's a few duds.
But then you could cut it short, couldn't you? You could just say, okay, let's do it in 20
I usually
minutes.
do. It usually goes shorter when that starts to happen. But surprisingly, in spite of that, there are people who will listen to that particular interview that I didn't think was so hot and think, that was great, I love that one, I got just what I needed out of it. So, different strokes for different folks, as I often say.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing, perhaps, to wrap it up, and that is that you have done all the work for such a long time.
5 years now.
5 years. And how many downloads have you got at the moment? How many people are watching your videos?
At the moment, it's about 100,000 video views per month.
100,000?
Yeah.
Just believe that.
YouTube views.
YouTube views.
And about 70-something thousand audio downloads in terms of the audio podcast.
Yes. Isn't that amazing? And I just feel that the donation button on Rick's website should be a little bit more focused on. The effect that you have on so many people really deserves that this donation button is pushed more frequently. So this is perhaps my last contribution to this interview, and I was really, really happy that you were available without having any idea about where I'm coming from and what I'm going to ask you.
You're a good interviewer. You can do this. Maybe I'll retire, you take over.
I love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DJ.